Welcome back to this week's theater episode of the Campfire Series podcast. I'm your host, Logan Soforenko. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. We have a very special guest for this week's theater episode from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory second national tour. We have Jenna Brooke Scannelli, who shares with me a little bit about her journey as a performer from cruise ships to the Wizard of Oz national tour and what it's like to be an understudy, and also what the future of theater's looking like. We're almost a year into this pandemic. What's going to happen after this? Let's get it.
Okay, so my name is Jenna Brooke Scannelli. I played Grandma Josephine on the national tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And a fun fact about me, I actually was a competitive cheerleader before I even started out in musical theater.
I want to talk a little bit about that because
Yeah.
my high school I went to, we had a few people go Division I college for cheer, and I'm like, what? And there's because you probably heard it a lot, growing up.
Yeah.
Is cheerleading a sport? Yes, of course it's a
Yes,
sport.
absolutely.
Come on.
It is definitely a sport.
So I can't wait to dive in with that a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You were in the second national tour, correct?
Yes, the second national tour, yeah.
So walk me through casting. I unfortunately have not seen the second national tour. The first national tour came in to Hollywood. I'm in Los Angeles. They came into Hollywood in 2019 of March. So tell me a little bit about how the casting process went, because was it they were having a completely new cast? Were some people coming over to the next company? What was it like?
Yeah, so it was actually, for me personally, it was a really quick process. My audition lasted a week before I found out about my offer, which is really unheard of. Normally it takes at least a couple of months for national tours to get the full casting out there. So I had just come home from a cruise line. I was a singer on Celebrity Cruises, and I had only been home for about a month. My agent had sent me an email and was like, hey, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is going back out. It was going back non-union, so they were recasting the entire show. And he asked, are you interested? Can I send you in for this? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So it was all self-tape. I submitted a self-tape, and then within days, they were like, great, we need more material from you. Can you come into the city for a final callback? There was a quick dance call, and then all within that same week, I had got my offer to join the cast. So it was really, really quick, super exciting, but it was a really fun process.
It seems a common theme that I've heard with people I've talked to is they spent time on cruise ships, and you're no different. So is that kind of like hey, there's an opportunity here. My agent wants to kind of send me here and do a part. So tell me a little bit about. I'm not really familiar with the whole performing on a cruise. I've only been on a cruise once in my entire life, and I was about 9 years old, so I don't remember it. So tell me a little bit about your time performing with. I don't know what cruise line, so share with us about it.
Yeah, so I worked for Celebrity Cruises. I did 2 contracts with them, one in 2018, and then my second one was in 2019. Honestly, when I first started in musical theater, I knew that I wanted to work on a cruise ship. I wanted that travel aspect. I wanted to see the world, and to get paid to sing and travel is a no-brainer to me. That was something that I absolutely wanted to be a part of. So when I auditioned, I knew that I was going to be, taken away from New York City for a while, but I was completely okay with that just because I was really excited to see the world. So my first contract, I was in Southeast Asia and Alaska, which was unreal. It was so incredible. My second contract, I was in Europe, and we did a little bit of the Caribbean at the beginning. So that was, just a great experience. I would never trade it for anything else. It was amazing.
Man, Alaska and South Asia, that's insane.
Yes.
When it comes to performing on the cruise, I assume there has to be not turbulence or rocking or seas. Did that I don't remember what cruises were like. Did that play a factor, or was it like, hey, I kind of forgot I was on a cruise, I'm performing right now?
For the most part, you kind of get used to it. We call it our sea legs. You kind of just get used to it. You know what to expect. But my first contract when we were in Asia, the waters there are super, super rocky. We actually sailed through a couple typhoons, which sounds really crazy, but it wasn't too bad. But there are some times where you can't go outside. They'll lock the door so that you can't go out onto the open decks just to keep you safe. But for the most part, it's really okay. You get used to it. You figure it out. Sometimes you take a step and the floor comes a little bit closer than you expected, and you're right there for it. So it's a good experience. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit crazy at times.
Isn't that the motto in theater? You got to be ready for anything. And,
Absolutely.
I always think that when it comes to live theater and how it, it's different than actual, on tape stuff and
Yes,
camera is anything
absolutely.
can happen. You're acting for a live product, and it's not going to be the same every week and every night. And
Yeah,
when
it
you're
changes all the time.
exactly, and when you're doing stuff for the camera, you're acting for the final product. You're
Yeah.
acting for that premiere, the opening premiere at the movie theater. So with
Yeah.
that being said, you take the step on the cruise ship and it rocks around a little bit.
Yeah, our
So
dancers would make jokes because we had a lot of lifts in our shows. And so with that
oh,
comes a lot of, strength and finding solid ground. So we always made jokes about it. Like they would do a big jump or something and the floor would meet them a little bit sooner. And they were like, all right, I'm on the ground a little bit quicker than I expected.
that's a little terrifying, but good for
A
you guys
little
for
bit.
getting it done. So really really cool hearing about the cruise ship. Also, did you ever have time to actually enjoy the cruise? And was there a water slide? Did you
Oh my
obviously was
gosh.
there ever obviously taking care of your voice and stuff like that? So you had to be responsible on the cruise. But did you like actually enjoy it and not just say, hey, I'm gonna lock myself in my room and rest
Yeah.
and get healthy, and we'll talk about how you took care of yourself on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But did you
Yeah,
ever enjoy the cruise?
yeah, as entertainers, you actually get a lot of privileges, which is really nice. We're able to eat in all the guest areas. Able to make reservations and go into the specialty dining, which is really nice. We can also get off the ship when we have port days, depending on what our show schedule is. So, obviously, if we have a show on a day that we're at port, we would stay on the ship just to get our last rehearsal in, have that mic check, stuff like that. But for the most part, we have um, a lot of opportunities on the ships, which is really, really nice. But with that comes a lot of responsibility as well. It's not all party and fun. You definitely have to, keep yourself healthy and, you know, energized. You don't want to be tired for the show. So, yeah, you get a lot of privileges, which is awesome.
What were your audiences like? Because I assume that when it comes to doing stuff on cruise ships, it's tourists and tourism and people are getting away. So what were the audiences like? Did you get good responses?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually really nice because a lot of the people that come onto ships, they don't often get to see live theater because
mm,
they live in, maybe the Midwest, or they don't live in places where a lot of tourists come through. They don't live in the city where they can see a Broadway show. So for a lot of people, they would always say, "Oh my gosh, this is my first time seeing a live performance." And it was just so exciting. So for that, it was really rewarding because it was kind of like letting new members into an experience that they had never seen before, which was really rewarding for us. But it depended on the itinerary and how the cruises were that week. But for the most part, the audiences were really, really amazing.
I think you hit something there when you said that there are some people that don't get theater because they live in the Midwest. I think that's
Yeah.
what's really awesome about non-union tours, and they do go to those places. And I remember talking to someone. He said he did a show in Hawaii, and I'm like, I can't think of stuff, but I can't wait to hear from you what your favorite venues were. And also, I have to ask you a question? Did you ever perform at the Kansas Starlight Bowl?
I have not, no, but I would love to. That is amazing.
I've always wondered what it's like doing it outdoors, and yeah,
I
I saw
know.
my first show a year ago at the Hollywood Bowl doing it. I'm like, that's just so
Wow.
weird. But
Yes.
now let's move into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Let's
Yeah.
before we get to the fun stuff. There's obviously work. In This is a very mechanical and not personal question. Did you ever do an ensemble track like in the show? Was there a lot of singing, a lot of vocals? Correct.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
When it came to rehearsals and your rehearsal time, did you actually get to sit down with your piano player and he would play the part for you and you'd record it on your phone and you'd have to learn it on your own over and over and over again back at your apartment? Was that what it was like?
Yeah, so we actually started rehearsals back in November of last year. We were in the city for about 4 weeks, I believe. And in rehearsals, you're working the entire time. So you're literally sitting there with your books in front of you. Our conductor and our music director, Nate Patton, was out in front of us and would say, "Okay, altos, these are your notes. Sopranos, these are your notes. Let's hear it together." And then you would work together as a cast and just like fine tuning everything, making sure that you're confident with what's going on. But at the same time, you're also learning choreography. So then you're figuring out, okay, how can I put what we just learned in our vocal rehearsal to the choreography that we're going to be doing in the show? So it's a lot of muscle memory. It's a lot of going home on your own and putting in that extra time to make sure that you come into rehearsal the next day and you know exactly what you're doing. So it definitely is a lot of work, but like I said earlier, it's super rewarding when you come back in the next day and everything just kind of comes together one by one. It's really exciting.
Was there a lot of stress maybe going to sleep? And I'm asking you this simply because I'm doing a show right now, like a Zoom type show, and we don't really have musical director stuff. So what we're doing is we're recording stuff over our performance. So we're like going to the studio. So we got this music, I'd say a week and a half ago. We have to be performance ready by Saturday. So I'm teaching a lot of stuff to myself, and I'm losing sleep over it. And it seems that it's you hit it right on the head, muscle memory. That's just so important. But was there ever a time where you're like, I'm just a little nervous that this may not necessarily work? We're going 4 weeks, and then we're doing a tour, eight shows a week.
Yeah, you know what? I guess this was my second national tour, and so I kind of got a grasp for it a little bit before I did the national tour of the Wizard of Oz in 2015. And so I kind of had a little bit of an idea of what was expected of me and my work ethic at that point. I've been working for a while now, and so I've kind of figured out what works best for me and how I learn the best. But yeah, there are definitely times where I'll sit down and be like, wow, I'm overwhelmed. Like there's so much to learn and so little time. But I find that the more you let that negativity consume your thoughts, you're not going to get those results that you're expecting. So you have to just relax into it, trust the process. You have an entire cast of people who are on your side and who are feeling the same way. So that's always helped me, kind of push myself along and knowing that at the end, it's all going to come together.
I mean, they always say you are your biggest critic, and when you throw that negativity
Absolutely.
on, that pours down bad energy and bad vibes on the craft that you love to do. And I think that theater is so magical, and if performers let that negativity take over, then that just completely destroys
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
So, and also, how did this tour, the rehearsal process, compare to Wizard of Oz?
I was pretty similar, actually. The only difference was in both tours, I understudied the main characters, which was really exciting. And The Wizard of Oz, I understudied Dorothy, which was super fun. I loved that. But I actually started rehearsals a week early for that. We had kind of like a Dorothy boot camp, if you will. It was really a week just getting to know the dogs because we had live dogs in the show. So it was, getting familiar with them and learning all of that material before welcoming the rest of the cast. But with Charlie, it was a little bit different because we all started together. We just kind of jumped right into it. It was a very quick process, like I said. So when they started rehearsal, they were ready to go as soon as that day one was out there. So it was pretty quick, but very similar rehearsal times.
I mean, when it comes to seeing the actual show, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of screens, and
Yes.
it's a very different show than anything I've ever seen. I saw it 3 times. I loved it, and I think there's the scene where it's like they're trying to cross like a bridge or something, and there's a bunch of
Yes.
stuff coming in the way. Like I can't see it, and then it hits him in the. I think it's something to that matter,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
tell me a little bit about how that kind of changed your perspective on theater. It changed mine, and I've seen a lot of shows, and I haven't seen anything like Charlie. So, how did all these screens and working with all this stuff change your attitude and perspective for theater?
Yeah. So one thing I really loved about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is that the second tour, we actually cut down on a lot of the set just because it was too big to travel with. The first national tour, obviously they had more opportunities to have bigger set pieces, but for us, we kind of cut down a little bit. So what I really loved was that a lot of it was imaginative. I mean, we had to really create these things in our minds, and we had to be able to really visualize it, like what you were talking about, the invisible corridors. I mean, you really have to see that in your head and be able to portray it so that the audience also sees what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? So finding that connection, it was definitely difficult in rehearsals, but like I said, once you get into tech rehearsals and you work it more, it kind of all just comes together. You really have to work together. It's not so much individual work, it's really working together as a group. You guys really have to come together and be able to portray to the audience what it is that they should be seeing on stage. So that was really challenging, but also a really cool experience, being on the stage and seeing it come together in our tech rehearsals.
What's the motto they say? It must be believed to be seen.
It must
You
be
gotta
really
be you gotta
seen.
use the imagination. That's what it
Yes,
is.
exactly. And that's what the whole show is about, is having that imagination and being able to see the unseen, which is really incredible to me.
Absolutely. Well, congrats to you on having such a great run. I don't know what the plan is for coming back. When I last spoke to your friend Nicole,
Yes.
way back, so things are
Uh-huh.
changing constantly in these time
Yeah.
periods. So, what is the plan? I don't want to ask you this because who knows when theater's going to be back. But what's the tentative? There we go. That's a good word. Tentative plan for returning for the show.
Yeah, so I can't say too much because we don't really
Right.
have too much information. We do know that we are going back out at some point. It's just
Good.
a matter of when and, seeing what's going on with the world and if theaters are willing to commit to us this far out in advance. But we are very hopeful that we will be returning next year. So fingers crossed.
It seems that tours are relatively looking to come back before Broadway. And in the things that I've read and the things that I've seen, but nothing is set in stone just simply because things are changing constantly. And you said
Right.
it, you can't say too much because quite frankly, I don't know what you know, but we don't know.
Right.
That's the awesome
Yeah,
unknown is we're approaching 1 year of being shut down, which is a heartbreaking milestone we have to make with
absolutely.
countless shows that are closing and tours that are closing. And that being said, it really makes you appreciate that you still have theater and
100%.
you still have this tour. So I can't wait to see you. Hopefully, you guys come somewhere near me. I don't know. I
Yes,
don't want.
hopefully.
We'll see what happens. But now, heading into the actual performance side of it, you go to a lot of cities. I don't. How many months did you guys actually perform before being shut down?
I believe we performed for, I want to say 4 months. We left, our first opening night was January 1st, and we were sent home in March. So it was kind of short, but it felt so long. I really felt like we were on tour for almost a year. And it's funny because when we started rehearsals, our cast started bonding like right out the gate, which was so nice. So I made so many incredible, incredible friends on that tour. I think because of that, it really felt like we were on tour for years. It just felt like it was never ending. And I'm so appreciative of that, especially now that we've been sent home for quite some time. But I believe that we were performing for about 4 or 5 months. So it wasn't really too long.
Well, I mean that time period you mentioned, that's 8 shows a week, and that's more than
Yeah.
most people do in
Oh,
their
yeah.
lifetime. So now heading into the 8 shows a week theme, well,
Yes.
first of all, has there ever been a week where you've done more than 8 shows a week? Because sometimes I heard someone did 12 shows a week. And I'm like, okay, hold on a
Oh my
second, that's
goodness.
insane.
That's a
So
lot.
has it been more than eight, or I mean,
I
that's
don't think
that's a
so. I think
lot.
we were pretty lucky where we had just the solid 8 shows a week. I
Good.
don't think there was ever a time where we had more than that. But like you said, it is possible. There are some tours that will have 3 show days where
Oh
they
my
do one in
god.
the morning, one in the afternoon, and then their evening performance. But we were pretty lucky with just the 8 shows a week.
So with the 8 shows a week theme being out there, obviously nowadays, especially when it comes to mental health and physical health, it's more important. Myself, I've gained the COVID-19, if you will, but
I'm
with
sure
that,
we all have.
oh, absolutely. And with that being
Yeah.
said, how did you balance it? How did you take care of yourself doing the shows? Obviously, you had Mondays off, I assume. So, how much did you utilize that? But also, what were some things you did to keep yourself physically strong and mentally healthy?
Yeah, it really is challenging. You don't realize that being on tour, we don't have access to a kitchen. We're not cooking our own food. We're pretty much going out all the time, whether it be breakfast, getting coffee, and then going to the theater. So your eating schedule is much different than how you would be at home. We don't really have that luxury of cooking your own meals. So that really does get challenging, especially on longer weeks where you're just so tired and you're craving just like a nutritious meal. In some of these cities, they don't have all the restaurants or the options that you want. Sometimes it's literally just fast food. Like if you're taking a bus to the next state, you don't always have the greatest options. Sometimes it's a gas station that you're stopping at. Sometimes you have a McDonald's. Like you really just have to make do. So that is definitely challenging when it comes to tour. But for the most part, we all would work out. You'd go to the gym in the morning, get your workout in for the day. We'd have rehearsals sometimes in the afternoons, especially for the understudies. So that was keeping us pretty active as well. But it's really up to you to just take that time to rest. You know yourself, you know your body and how you react to this type of lifestyle. So I think we were all pretty fortunate to have been able to figure out what works best for us.
I know this is logistic stuff, and you can totally deny me is like respect to privacy. But when it comes to doing stuff and getting food, like you said, fast food and dinners and takeout stuff, is that provided by the tour? Do they give you some help, or is that like, hey, you're on your own for that?
We get a per diem with our pay to provide for meals and stuff, but it's pretty much up to you depending on what it is that you want. You're on your own with that. They don't really provide meals for you. Whereas if you worked at a dinner theater, sometimes they give you the option to have that meal that they'll give to the guests. So it
Well,
depends.
interesting. I did not know
Yeah,
that. So thank you for sharing some knowledge. Because
yeah.
I always
Well, fun
here's
fact.
here here's the thing. When it comes to national tours, my parents for some reason. My dad he's a coach. He doesn't know theater that much, but he appreciates theater whenever we take him. And
Yeah.
he always like asked me because I got the theater pod, and he asked like, what, how do they get around? And I'm like, I don't know. I know there's a big difference. You said there's buses, and
Yeah.
you have that part of your pay that helps you get the meals, and and you said you cut down on the second national tour from the first national tour when it comes to sets and traveling and all that stuff, and that's stuff I did not know. So now when it comes to doing these tours, what is something that absolutely sticks out with you when it comes to cities? What's a city that absolutely says, "Hey, that one was a favorite"? I don't
Mm,
know if you guys ever performed at the Fox theaters, but that's been a common
yes.
theme with the performers.
Oh my gosh, that theater, there's nothing like it. It is absolutely unreal. It's incredible. If you ever get the opportunity to see a show there or visit, I would highly recommend it. It is pure magic, quite literally. It's magical. But thinking about cities, immediately I thought New Orleans. That was
Mm.
truly one of the most exciting experiences I've ever had, really. We spent a week there. The theater was gorgeous. The city itself is unreal. It's just lively. There's music on every corner. We were actually there towards the beginning of Mardi Gras, so that was, I mean, that's an unreal experience. It was so much
Oh,
fun.
then that means you were pretty close to the COVID. Was that the last city
Yes, so
before
that was
COVID?
one of our last cities. Our final city was Grand Rapids, but we were there
Okay.
only a couple weeks before, which is funny because at the time when COVID began, that was a highlight city that was showing a lot of cases. And around that time, I know for myself, I wasn't really too familiar with what was going on. So I was not really worried about anything. I wasn't thinking about any sort of virus, or we were just out enjoying our time, having fun. And I guess we got lucky. I mean,
It's
none of
fat.
us got sick or anything, so we were okay. But it's crazy to look back on it now and realizing that we were really in the middle of it.
My thing that I always like heard with COVID is towards the beginning I had family members ask me if, hey, I was doing a show and like, do you think it's gonna be canceled because of COVID? I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
just because we all genuinely thought it was just another not flu, but
Yeah.
it was gonna get 2 weeks. We'll be
Right.
fine.
I really never could have imagined. I didn't even have that thought in my mind. It's funny because a couple weeks later, we were in Worcester, Massachusetts, and
Woohoo!
my parents were coming to visit because I live in New Jersey, so it was pretty close. So they were coming to see the show. And I remember my mom texting me, and she was like, what's going on with the show? At that time, we had stopped doing any backstage tours. We weren't allowing anybody to stay outside of the stage door just because of COVID. And so that was kind of like the beginning for us. And she would text me every day and just be like, what's going on? How are you guys? Is everything okay? Have you heard anything about being sent home? And I was like, no, I had no idea. I was never even thinking that. I was like, no, we'll be fine. They're doing a great job of, keeping us updated and making sure we're all safe, which I'm very thankful for. Our company was fantastic with making sure that we were feeling safe and, doing well if we were feeling a little bit ill. And then a couple weeks later, it hit us, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, I never could have imagined ever."
Here we are, but
I know.
but New Orleans says that's the one that stuck out with you. And
Yes.
how was Worcester, Mass? It's a good.
It's funny. I went to school in Boston, so I was very familiar with that area. I had
Where
never
did you
been
go to
to
school?
Boston Conservatory.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah, so I loved Boston, and we actually got an opportunity to drive into Boston for the day, which was great just to kind of go and visit my old roots. I love that city. Boston is amazing. I love it. But Worcester was cute, a cute little quaint city. Can't complain. I liked it.
I'm a little biased for Boston, as
Of
you can see
course.
from behind me. But when I was in Boston last year, I tried to get my parents to say, hey, let's go down to the Boston Opera House and let's go watch a show. Because like, yes, we're gonna
Yes.
fly across the country and we're gonna see a show. When in 3 days we're going to New York and seeing shows there. I'm like, oh come on, it'd be cool.
Right.
But with that being said, thank goodness you said it that you were safe towards the beginning, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that it shut down, but I can't even think about. I think the common theme for why theater isn't back yet, it's not because of the audience, and you can social distance an audience. You've seen it in
Right.
sports. It's the performers, like and
Right.
I think in New
Yeah.
York the backstages are a little bit smaller than the spaces you guys
Yeah.
have on tour, but still I think that hopefully we're moving in the right direction with the
Absolutely.
vaccine distribution and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm not a political commentator or a scientific commentator, so I
Mhm.
can just keep hope and pray that we're
Right.
getting back soon. So
Yeah.
as we kind of hit towards the end of not this pandemic, but having all this time off. You mentioned that it's kind of nice having it, but is there ever a time where, hey, I want to get back to the theater, but also what are you going to take away from this? I know that with all the stuff that's happened in our world, socially, with injustice, and with health crisis on a rise, and now there's weather stuff, and obviously political stuff. So it's been a whirlwind of a past, not 2020, but 11 months from
Right.
here, and then then when COVID shut the world down.
Yeah.
When you go back into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, what's it going to be like? You're going to take away stuff and apply it into your performance, and not just for Charlie, but also when it comes to future projects.
Yeah. I mean, when this first started, when we were first sent home, I really struggled at the beginning because, like I said, I had met so many incredible people and I wasn't ready to say goodbye to them. I mean, you are really pretty much forced to become a family with the people that you're touring with. You're literally living together, you're performing together, you're traveling together, you are together all the time. So you become very accustomed to finding these people and making them part of your family. And so when we were sent home, I just remember feeling so crushed. Like I was just sad. I think now, being a year out, the number one thing that I just can't stop thinking about is never take for granted what you have. There are so many times on tour where you feel tired or you miss home and you wish you could be with your family and you think, you know what, I think I'm just going to sit in the hotel today. Don't do it. If I could go back, I would wake up in the morning, I would go out, I would explore the cities, and I would make sure that I got to do everything that I wanted to do before I left that city. Because there are times where you just don't want to do it. You think, oh, whatever, I'll be back. But now, having it been a year, I will never ever take for granted what I had, because it could be taken away from you so quickly, even when you're not ready for it.
And that's just the theme, and especially I don't think anybody was ready at the beginning. I think that it
Oh,
was, and especially in Los Angeles when it shut down, it was raining, and we're like,
oh,
what? We don't get rain. That's
yeah.
crazy. So here we are. We are forced to be trapped inside our houses. I remember this is the thing that I've done for coping. On Minecraft, the
Oh my
video game, I have built 12 Broadway theaters
God.
and given shows and given them new shows and housing lives and
I love it.
contracts, and that's just the weird stuff you did,
Yes.
to cope. And
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
being at a sports clips, getting my last haircut where it wasn't my grandmother, because of COVID stuff, and I remember
Yeah,
saying, oh, are we gonna be locked in our houses for the next 2 weeks? And
I
I
know
think
it.
that being in Los Angeles County, for me specifically, you said it. Never take anything for granted,
Yeah, you
because,
really can't.
and we've been the hot spot for this thing for the past 4 months, so it's
Yeah.
crazy. I haven't left the corner of my room, and
Oh my
you never
God.
take anything for granted. But with that being said, I want to hear some last advice you have for aspiring performers, and
Yeah,
especially nowadays. Thank God, work opportunities are starting to pop up a little bit, whether that be in voiceover or film, and whether that be an
absolutely.
extra in Law and Order SVU or whatever that may be. Thank gosh, stuff is starting to pop up again. But when it comes to theater specific, what's some advice you can give to young performers, and also some takeaways you have, just some
Yeah.
last thoughts before we wrap up?
Overall, I would just say do the work. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I know it looks so glamorous. It seems like such a glamorous life, and overall, I mean, it really is. We're very lucky to get to do what we do, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of, self-reflection and figuring out, where do I fit in? What's my path? What's my type? You know what I mean? You have to really know those things and be able to present your best self when you go into audition. So my number one thing would be definitely do the work, but also, if don't stop. Do you know what I mean? Like, keep going, keep doing it. It gets hard. You're going to hear no, no, no. You're going to get rejections. But if this is something that you're so passionate about, you have to keep going because it will be worth it. You will get that opportunity. It just takes some time. So I would definitely say just keep going.
I had a buddy that wasn't getting turned away from auditions. He got leads in high school. He got leads in college, and I'm like, you worried about something? He's like, yeah, I haven't been told no yet. I want to be told no. So he went on a bunch of auditions and he got rejected. And he was like, I needed that. I think
There you
that
go.
you hit it. You're
Yeah.
going to get rejected. And weirdly enough, my friend was like, "Hey, this is great," but other people are say, "Oh man, I got turned away from this audition. I think I'm gonna go work at a Trader Joe's." Like you can't give up. And
Yeah. And it's hard for some people who live in smaller towns because when you have the arts in a small town, you may be that big fish in a small pond. You
mm-hmm,
are the it factor. You are the leads in those high school shows.
right.
And then you come into the city where all of a sudden you're one in 10,000 and you're not what you thought you were in high school. So that's for a lot of people, that's like a rude awakening. They get to New York and they're like, oh my goodness, I need to humble myself a little bit because there's a lot of other people who have been doing this longer, who are training harder, who are doing sometimes more. So you have to definitely take that into account and just humble yourself and think, I can do this. Keep going, put the work in, and you'll get there.
Couldn't have been said any better. And I appreciate you taking some time and coming on and just talking. And I think that was a really big humbling experience for me because I'm a freshman in college, so I made that transition from high school to college in this pandemic, and I did get a serious reality check. I went to a small school. I did a award show. The I don't know if you're familiar with the Jimmies or
Yes,
the
absolutely.
regional program that goes to the Jimmies, and I'm surrounded by all these people that are going to Texas State, Boston
Yeah.
Conservatory, Michigan, and I'm feeling intimidated, and
Yeah,
I don't know what to do, but I found a place that offered me a spot, and I'm very thankful for that. But I think getting a reality check and being humbled and having humility is so huge in this industry. So I appreciate you sharing your insights and coming on talking about the show. I'm looking forward to hopefully you guys come to SoCal, but if not, I look
yes,
forward to following your journey in the next not just coming months, but also year when you do get back on the road.
absolutely. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.